My name is Emma Mannion, and my project is entitled Lutie Stearns, The Difficult Debate and Wise Diplomatic Steps to Strengthen Our Democracy by Promoting the Establishment of Libraries Across Wisconsin and the Nation. During the Wisconsin Progressive Era, self-proclaimed radical Lutie Stearns tirelessly debated and used her diplomatic skills to convince political and industry leaders to establish and fund free libraries. The consequence of this historical shift was the empowerment of common citizens. The success of her work continues to inspire librarians, inform policymakers, and educate readers today. Lutie Stearns died yesterday after a long illness in her home here. She was 77 years old. I'm here at the library reading an obituary from an old newspaper. Funny thing about this obituary, it's mine. Who am I? I'm Lutie Stearns. I'm here from the great beyond, reflecting decades back from where we are today to share my story. The story that goes much deeper than the facts stated in my obituary. My life ended. Not only did my life end, but for most, my story ended, and I was forgotten. Sadly, nobody can even find my gravesite because it is unmarked. Let's look back as I share my story and how my legacy lives on in today's world. I've been called a radical and a communist, but I recall that Susan B. Anthony was termed an old hen, and Jane Addams was designated as the most dangerous person in America, so I'm in good company. And I stand by that characterization, but I'm getting ahead of myself because there's nothing radical about books and information. Or is there? When I started fighting to establish libraries across Wisconsin during the Progressive Era in the 1890s, I was a woman in a man's world. I did not have the same privileges as men and didn't even have the right to vote. During that era, there was intense social and political reform aimed at making progress toward a better society for all. This included women's rights, workers' rights, and other basic human rights, like the right to vote. My focus today is on the right to information. At that time, there were no phones or televisions, and in some areas, there wasn't even access to a newspaper. In fact, only one farmer in 300 received a daily newspaper. Roads were narrow and typically made out of dirt and gravel, which led to poor and unreliable traveling conditions. Information did not travel quickly nor often to these rural areas. Too many Americans were being isolated from the world around them. In addition, privileged people had the belief that poor people deserved to be poor. In fact, in a Baraboo newspaper, it was written, "The whole scheme of Christmas giving has been perverted till it now means people too lazy to earn comfort for themselves all expect something." Society didn't understand that those less fortunate often didn't have access to resources to improve their circumstances. I was determined to change these limitations by empowering people through literature and information. I traveled to the Chicago World's Fair in 1893, where I met Melville Dewey, the inventor of the Dewey Decimal System. He shared ideas that led me to start libraries in Wisconsin. I diplomatically teamed up with Frank Hutchins, a left-leaning public servant, and James Stout, a Republican senator and lumber tycoon, to create a commission whose goal was to build and maintain a statewide library system in Wisconsin. I needed to convince people from both sides of the political aisle to not only agree on the problem, but also the solution. As quoted from my autobiographical article, it was critical to keep the issue out of politics and also show the connection between libraries and other educational institutes. After much debate, the act to establish the Wisconsin Free Library Commission passed on April 29, 1895. At that time, there were only 6 free public libraries in Wisconsin, so I had a big job ahead. Soon after, I wrote a book entitled Essentials in Library Administration to guide others on how to start and run a library. In it, I wrote, "The necessity of a library should be urged through the local press and by private appeals. When the interest of the public is aroused, make a careful study of the law relating to libraries and decide upon some plan of action." First, I built the political foundation for the WFLC to be possible. Then I built the blueprint in the form of a book so that others can implement free libraries themselves. I often encountered resistance when trying to establish libraries. People debated, saying, "Those libraries cost too much," or "There's no place to put the library and no one would use it." In a 1900s newspaper, it was written, "No free libraries, say stockholders." Many did not see the value of literature and the doors it would open. I traveled throughout Wisconsin diplomatically promoting libraries in many venues. In 1906, I wrote in a report, attended Farmers Institutes, 700 farmers. I find that there are hundreds of citizens that know nothing of our work, and such gatherings are of great value in arousing interest in our work and the library movement. I often had to visit towns many times to debate the value of libraries. I documented that I visited a community 12 times before I could get the town president, also owner of a dance hall, to appoint a library board. In 1904, while in lacrosse lobbying for libraries, I noted that I secured the cooperation of the local newspapers that have given columns of space to the project, the local clubs, the library board, the county board, and the superintendent of schools. My efforts were often reported in newspapers throughout the state. But not all of my work succeeded. Due to local political bickering, I was never able to establish a traveling library in Waukesha. The final vote noted in the proceedings of the Board of Supervisors in 1905 stated 7 ayes and 23 noes. In Kenosha, one board member claimed, "Those radicals are on the take from book publishers." But after a year of debate and diplomacy, they finally voted in favor of a library. Despite all these challenges, I persevered and convinced communities all over the state to establish libraries, as seen on this map. My next fight was at the national level. In 1905, I wrote to the Postmaster General in Washington, D.C., requesting that Postal Service include the delivery of books. He refused. In 1910, I was still debating the, and I quote, ridiculous sight of the rural mail carrier driving along the country road, closely followed by the traveling library delivery wagon. Finally, after 7 years of debate, Congress passed a bill providing for parcel post delivery. My work has informed and inspired librarians for over a century, and I've been recognized in the Wisconsin Library Hall of Fame. It is a great honor that lacrosse librarian Jenny D. Rocher said in a 2020 book talk, "Lutie Stearns is my hero." Long after my death, a study concluded that access to a free public library increased the probability of becoming a professional or a farm owner. My work establishing free public libraries enabled workers to have broader opportunities. This historical shift of implementing free public libraries empowered common citizens. For example, Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor said, "I needed to escape from my home, and I fortuitously found the local library." Sotomayor proceeded to use the library to develop a love for books and excel in school. On the other side of the aisle, Justice Clarence Thomas also discovered his local library as a child and said, "The library was how I expanded my world, using books to visit places that were out of my reach." Between 1896 and 1914, after countless debates and almost 2 decades of strategic diplomacy in favor of libraries, I helped establish the Wisconsin Free Library Commission, and in turn, 150 free public libraries, 1,400 traveling libraries, and 14 county library systems. Not only did my work lead to the establishment of hundreds of libraries across Wisconsin, it also provided a template that guided others to use my strategies of debate and diplomacy to implement free libraries. My work extended beyond Wisconsin. I traveled around the country giving speeches to share my knowledge and help others continue the mission. I also wrote a book about library administration to guide others. Thomas Jefferson said, and it's true, knowledge is power. So yes, I was empowering our citizens, using my skills to debate and diplomatically convince the powers that be to enable people of all backgrounds to have access to information was a historical turning point and is still relevant in today's world. These strategies can be applied to people of today who are advocating for equal access to the internet so that all can use this tool to gain knowledge, which is essential to a healthy democracy. While most people don't know my name and my grave is unmarked, my legacy lives on in the generations of people across the nation that advocate for and utilize libraries. During the Wisconsin Progressive era, self-proclaimed radical Lutie Stearns tirelessly debated and used her diplomatic skills to convince political and industry leaders to establish and fund free libraries. The consequence of this historical shift was the empowerment of common citizens. The success of her work continues to inspire librarians, inform policymakers, and educate readers today.